D. James Kennedy Ministries presents Truths That Transform.
Today we're taking a look at an organization that places its agenda ahead of the safety and well-being of children on Truths That Transform.
This is Truths That Transform.
Welcome to Truths That Transform, a production of D. James Kennedy Ministries, where we are standing for truth and defending your freedom. Next week on this program, we will be broadcasting a special program, an expose, on a group that is trying to silence you and me by branding us as haters for holding a biblical worldview. That group is the Southern Poverty Law Center. And we invite you to join us next week at this same time for that special program. Today, you'll see why it's important. You will discover how the outsized influence of this group threatens all Christians. We begin with Dr. Felipe Vizcarrondo. He is a retired pediatrician and associate professor of pediatrics and a member of the American College of Pediatricians, which, like D. James Kennedy Ministries, has been designated as a so-called hate group by the SPLC. Doc, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about the American College of Pediatricians. How is it different from some of the other associations?
Well, the American College of Pediatricians is a small group and hasn't been around for very long either. It was founded in the year 2002. And it is a group that stands for truth, for scientific truth. And it is a group that stands for the well-being and the health of children. We are for absolutes, and there are absolutes in medicine just like they are in other parts of life that transcend whatever the fashion of the moment is. Mm-hmm. And we are sometimes attacked because of this, because the fashion of the moment is just that. It's the fashion, and it changes from year to year sometimes. But there are some absolute values that we believe in. We believe that the life is sacred from conception to natural death. Mm-hmm. We believe that the parents are the best teachers of the children.
It sounds like that one of the distinctions, maybe the major distinction, is in addition to looking out for the welfare of children based on the best available science, you're also, though, committed to truth, to biblical truth, because God's standard is what helps us know how to raise children.
Correct. And it's kind of unfortunate that we're called a hate group, because the American College of Pediatricians doesn't hate anything or anybody. We're actually for children. The only thing that we hate, that we're anti, is anti-harm for the child.
So what do you think is the source of the Southern Poverty Law Center's designation? Why did they get mad at you and decide to label you a hate group?
I believe that the reason is we've been called that is because they feel they claim that we are anti lesbian, gay, and LGBT individuals. Mm-hmm. The college is not anti anybody. The college is for children. If
your interest is the welfare of children, then to embrace their agenda, the homosexual and transgender agenda, in the face of that science, would be disastrous for children, wouldn't it?
It would be, yes. Children during the first decade of life don't have a firm idea of sexuality. They don't. They are just growing up, and they're interested in other things. One of the issues that we think is really important is that this confusion that the children have at an early age is not validated and then described as something permanent and immutable, which is what some other groups are doing.
Describe for us, so there's a young child under the age of 10, goes through gender confusion. The parents and others mistakenly validate that. What are some of the tragic consequences that those children face once they get into puberty, into adulthood?
What happens is, remember, the children are not of age, so they cannot consent to treatment, so the parents have to consent to the treatment. So the initial part of the treatment is some medications or actually some chemicals that are given to the child that block puberty. A few years after that, the children are given cross hormones. Cross hormones are hormones of the opposite sex of their biological sex. So the boy is given female hormones, the girl is given male hormones. And then by the age of 16, 17, or 18, when they're of age themselves, then they have surgery that transforms the appearance. In a study that was done in Sweden, which is one of the most permissive societies or cultures in Europe, they found that the incidence of suicide in the transgender demographic, the transgender population, is 20 times higher than the general population. So these folks are not happy.
God gives us responsibilities to minister on His behalf to people, to poor people, to sick people,
Right.
And pediatricians do that all the time, don't they? They're ministering to the weakest and most vulnerable people in our society,
Right.
to children. Tell us about your sense of having a stewardship responsibility as a servant of God to minister to these kids.
Well, the Lord asks us to be stewards of our environment. And I think of the environment, not just the physical environment, but the environment that's provided by the people that are with us. And the Lord has given us the gift of children. The best environment for the rearing of children is with a mother and a father in a low conflict marriage family situation. These children, the children that grow in this environment, are the ones that fare the best, that have the best results.
Dr. Vizcarrondo, thank you for being with us. This is an important topic, and we really appreciate your contribution to it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. How sad and ironic that the Southern Poverty Law Center labels the American College of Pediatricians a hate group for upholding the science that tells us children do best when they grow up in a home with one father and one mother. One might reasonably argue that, in fact, it's the SPLC and groups like them who are the true haters. In this case, children are the target of their hate, as the SPLC puts a deviant and destructive sexual and political agenda ahead of their well-being. Sadly, this has long been one of the most sordid tactics of the left to separate impressionable children from God and His commandments at any cost. Dr. D. James Kennedy speaks to this issue in this portion of his message, Train Up a Child.
Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. For many centuries, Christians have taken those words very seriously as they have attempted to rear up their children and train them in the fear and admonition of the Lord, to teach them godly living, moral conduct. They bring them to church and to Sunday school. They teach them in the home and pray with them and for them. There is an old aphorism that says, as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. Well, there is a small army of twig twisters who are active today in our society, who are determined that these trees will not grow straight and tall. A force which is dedicated to undoing everything which you as parents are attempting to do in your homes, with your children, and which we are attempting to do in the church and the Sunday school. I speak of the change agents, as they like to call themselves, in our public school system. This growing body of individuals committed to no belief in God or religion at all, committed to no belief in moral absolutes, committed to no commitment to this nation, but rather to a one-world government, to socialism, and to the destruction of all traditional moral values. and what inflammatory rhetoric they use about parents. If you want to get involved with your students in their schools, be ready to be called the following: fascists, censors, witch hunters, hate mongers. What happens in school? What do you send your children to school for? Why, you say, I send my children to school in order that they may learn. That they may learn how to read and write. They may get an education. May I say to you, my friends, that is no longer the official philosophy of what takes place in school. As one leading educator pointed out, all of our children entering the public school system are sick. That's why. That's why we need clinics, therapists, and treatment, because all of the children are sick. You say, what have they got? The measles, the flu? No. They're suffering from a much more malignant disease. They're suffering from love of country, respect for our elected officials and for those in authority, a belief in God and religion, belief in moral absolutes, sexual bias. They must be cured of their sexual bias. What is their sexual bias, you say? They are biased toward heterosexual relationships. That bias will be cured. If you didn't understand that, you better wake up. As Paul Blanchard, one of our nation's leading humanist educators, said, it may be that Johnny can't read, but the very fact that he is compelled to go to public school for 12 years means that his mind is divested of all of that religious superstition. What is that religious superstition? It's what all of you believe. There is a God. Christianity is true. The Bible is the Word of God. There are moral absolutes. All of that religious superstition will be eradicated from his mind. Many Christians in previous years were willing to sacrifice greatly for their children. Train up a child in the way that he should go. And when he is old, he, one way or the other, will not depart from it. As the twig is bent, so grows the tree.
As Dr. Kennedy explained today, it has been a long-time goal of radical secularists to indoctrinate our children, largely through the public school system, on issues such as homosexuality. One of their other chief agents in achieving that goal has been the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has shamefully designated groups that believe and promote a biblical view of marriage and sexuality as being hate groups. Next week, we will broadcast a special expose on the Southern Poverty Law Center. And as you're about to see in a preview of that program, the SPLC's provocative and prejudiced designations are taken all too seriously by schools, by the media, and even by law enforcement.
The Southern Poverty Law Center has a wonderful public relations operation where they have been able to sell themselves to the media, to the decision makers. They are using the huge wealth that they are receiving through their mail fundraising operation to promote themselves so they then can sell this message that they are trying to implant in the minds of Americans to turn Americans against traditional values, against our Christian heritage.
The Southern Poverty Law Center has been extraordinarily successful in positioning itself as an unbiased arbiter of so-called hate groups, while disguising its extreme left-wing ideology.
Well, one of the ways that Southern Poverty Law Center gets its message out, it does so by being this respectable organization, and has been very, very clever in going to law enforcement agencies and saying, look, we'll do some work for you. We'll determine who these hate groups are, and hate groups are typically associated with violence. We'll give you a heads up on who they are, and as a result of that, a lot of these police organizations look upon the Southern Poverty Law Center as a real source for them to help them in any crime prevention. Then another thing that they've done is opened up their website to schools, and they go into schools and preach tolerance.
It's very dangerous whenever we have any organization that's referenced at all by any part of government for law enforcement, where the organization effectively tries to isolate whole groups of people because of their faith, specifically isolate people who believe in biblical teachings, believe in the Bible, as somehow they're being a hate group or equivalent to the KKK. That's what they're attempting to do. And if they get away with it, every church in America that teaches from Scripture and believes in the teachings of Scripture will be categorized on the same level as the KKK. And that would open the door for tremendous tyranny.
A few years ago, this slide on religious extremism was shown at a U.S. Army Reserve Equal Opportunity Training briefing. First on the list was evangelical Christianity. Fifth on the list was Al-Qaeda. Where in the world did the U.S. Army officials putting on that training get their information? The answer, of course, is the Southern Poverty Law Center.
The media will cite whatever the Southern Poverty Law Center says as gospel truth. Once you can say that, somebody's on the SPLC's hate list, and if you're a journalist for the mainstream media, then you point out, yes, this group is on the hate list for the SPLC, and this is automatically bad. This shows you what haters the group is. So that's essentially what's happening.
Just one example occurred when veteran CBS newsman Bob Schieffer interviewed Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council as the Supreme Court was hearing the same-sex marriage case.
And Ms. Perkins, I'm going to say this to you up front. You and your group have been so strong in coming out against this and against gay marriage that the Southern Poverty Law Center has branded the Family Research Council an anti-gay hate group. We have been inundated by people who say we should not even let you appear because they, in their view, quote, you don't speak for Christians. Do you think you have taken this too far?
No. Examples like this are too numerous to count. The SPLC has, in recent decades, been partially successful in casting mainstream, traditional Christians as haters worthy of being silenced.
Well, the Southern Poverty Law Center has an aura of respectability because of its history. It came into being because of the civil rights struggle, and they were exposing white supremacist groups and Klan groups and white citizens councils and all of those organizations that were promoting segregation and defending segregation and racism in the United States. But they've now taken such a hard turn to the left, they've just fallen off the surface of the earth. And you know, they just label people that disagree with any of the multicultural, moral relativist views concerning transgenderism, homosexuality, etc., as being a hate group.
Recently, one of the nation's leading charity trackers, GuideStar, began using the SPLC's hate designations in its evaluations of charities, marking dozens of mainstream conservative nonprofits as hate groups. While insisting GuideStar does not engage in partisan politics, its CEO said in June 2017, "We intend to continue using the SPLC as a data source."
No organization should be able to have that kind of power and that kind of influence. And we're hoping that, that society will learn from the mistakes that they're making to realize that indirectly, it's actually an attack on everyone.
I would say, summing it up, that the Southern Poverty Law Center is not a neutral, reliable source on hate. And if you want to find more reliable sources, turn to something like the FBI, which actually used to use the Southern Poverty Law Center's material, but doesn't anymore because they're not reliable. And so if you want to find out something useful about hate in America, the Southern Poverty Law Center is not where you want to go. You'll find plenty of polemics, and if you happen to agree, if you're so inclined to believe what the Southern Poverty Law Center says, you'll believe them because they have built up this very respectable facade, especially during recent years.
The fact is, the Southern Poverty Law Center's often phony designations of certain organizations as hate groups are merely emblems of their biased and hard-left political views. But they exert such a malevolent influence largely because people don't realize that the SPLC is nothing like it was back in the early 1970s. The world needs to know the truth, and you can help us unmask the real SPLC. Here's my good friend Jennifer Kennedy Cassidy to tell us more. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Frank. The Southern Poverty Law Center has designated numerous Christian groups, including D. James Kennedy Ministries, the Family Research Council, and the Alliance Defending Freedom, as so-called hate groups. That designation has been adopted by the media, by many public institutions, and even led to gun violence at the Family Research Council when a deranged homosexual activist looked them up on the SPLC's hate map and attacked them. And just last month, a man who had followed the SPLC's page on Facebook shot a conservative congressman and 3 other people in a politically motivated assassination attempt. The SPLC's attack on traditional biblical Christianity needs to stop, and their deeds need to be exposed. Next week, we plan to air a brand new, hard-hitting TV documentary called Prophets of Hate, the Southern Poverty Law Center. Our television production team has been hard at work on this important program, and we want to make sure it's seen as widely as possible. That's why I'm asking you to stand with us today by making a generous donation to the ongoing work of this ministry. We'll thank you by sending you a DVD copy of this special Prophets of Hate, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which will also contain bonus material not included in the television broadcast. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677, or go online to djkm.org. As recently as 2011, even liberal leaders like Barack Obama affirmed publicly that marriage is the union of one man and one woman. Hillary Clinton publicly affirmed that view until 2013. Now, in 2017, you can be designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center for holding a view of marriage that virtually everyone held until the last few years. And that hate designation can bring all sorts of repercussions, as we've seen. It's time to get the urgent truth out about the biased, far-left agenda of the SPLC. And that's what we will do with your help in the TV documentary, Prophets of Hate, the Southern Poverty Law Center. Please make a generous donation to help us air this program and continue the other work of this ministry. And we'll thank you by sending you this bold documentary on DVD featuring bonus material that won't be aired on the broadcast. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677, or go online to djkm.org.
God's Word gives us a clear and particular responsibility when it comes to rearing children, especially in their moral formation. Jesus famously warned, "Whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea." How we treat children is very serious in the sight of God. This is why it's so very dangerous for us to be uninformed about the efforts in our public school systems to propagandize and indoctrinate our children with the fallacious and misguided blather of postmodernism. And at the same time, these same schools demonize those who subscribe to a biblical, and we might add, scientific view of human sexuality, branding them as hate groups. News reports of adults leading children astray down deadly paths are absolutely heartbreaking. A couple in St. Louis has lobbied their insurance company to pay for hormone-blocking drugs to keep their 11-year-old son from going through puberty because they say he identifies more as a girl. Parents Magazine reports on a mother who decided to raise her son as a daughter because of something the child said at age 4. And doctors are revising standards to allow children to undergo opposite-sex hormone therapy at younger and younger ages. All of this has come despite the fact that there is no objective, identifiable, biological basis for so-called transgenderism. And despite the fact that a recent Johns Hopkins study shows that more than 80% of male children in the study who reported same-sex attraction eventually grew out of it. The Scriptures tell us that God looked at His creation, including His design to create humans as male and female, and declared it good. Dear friends, never have those who would separate children from biblical truth place them in greater danger than in this radical challenge to the logical, scientific, and biblical view of sexuality. D. James Kennedy Ministries is standing for truth and defending your freedom. I'm Frank Wright. Thanks for joining us for Truths That Transform. And be sure to tune in next week for Prophets of Hate, the Southern Poverty Law Center. We'll see you then.
Next week on Truths That Transform.
The Southern Poverty Law Center has become the enemy of free speech and civil rights and civil liberties.
The Southern Poverty Law Center is irresponsible and reckless, and frankly, it results in putting people's lives in danger.
That's next week. Today's program is available on DVD for your gift to this ministry of any amount. Please call, write, or log on to our website today. This has been a production of D. James Kennedy Ministries.